He waited 33 years to feel something sacred. He thought faith would prepare him, that patience would make love pure. But when the night finally came, holiness felt like absence. In a quiet hotel room, beneath soft white sheets, Matt sat beside the woman he had promised to cherish. The air was still. She looked at him with kind eyes and whispered, "I don't feel anything." Not anger, not desire, just fear wrapped in honesty. Outside, the world called it a celebration. Inside, two believers sat in silence, newly married, deeply alone. He had imagined warmth, connection, redemption. Instead, he felt the weight of every sermon he had ever believed pressing against his chest. He didn't touch her. She didn't ask him to. They prayed instead. But even prayers sounded hollow when the body stayed silent. That night, he learned a truth no one had dared to preach. Purity can protect you from sin, but it can also protect you from yourself. For weeks, he would tell himself that it was only nerves, that love would bloom with time. Yet something inside him had cracked, a quiet fracture where devotion met denial. What if holiness without tenderness is just fear wearing white? And what happens when a man who has waited his whole life for love finally meets it and realizes his body no longer knows how to receive it? This is where his faith begins to break, and something far deeper begins to wake. Before the wedding, Matt's life was measured in disciplines: morning prayers before sunrise, scripture before breakfast, service before rest. His church community admired him, the man who waited, the example of conviction in a world that had forgotten restraint. Every Sunday, he sat at the same pew, sang the same hymns, and believed that patience was the highest form of devotion. He met Sarah at a Bible retreat when they were both 28. She spoke softly, with the kind of gentleness that felt like faith made human. They courted under the watchful eyes of families and pastors. Every moment together was careful, chaperoned, and filled with promises they could not yet touch. They didn't hold hands until 6 months in. Their first kiss came a year later, on the night he asked her to marry him. Both trembled, not from passion, but from the sacredness they had been taught to protect. Matt believed that waiting was proof of strength. Each time his desire stirred, he turned to prayer. He was told that discipline purified longing, that the heart must command the body. And so, when he woke from dreams flushed with want, he would kneel beside his bed, whispering forgiveness for feelings he had never acted upon. His love became a performance of control. Sarah carried her own shadows. Raised in a family where silence was modesty, she had been taught that a woman's virtue lived in her restraint. She once confided, trembling, that her mother warned her never to let a man see her body fully, even after marriage. Matt had smiled then, thinking faith would heal all fears. He didn't realize that faith could also hide them. Their wedding was everything they had prayed for: hymns, candlelight, and a sea of approving faces. When he lifted her veil, the world seemed to pause. He believed in that moment that all his waiting had led to something holy. But holiness, he would learn, does not erase history, it only exposes it. That night, when she turned away from him, he felt a confusion that no scripture could explain. He didn't feel rejected, he felt erased, as if the years of waiting had built not a bridge, but a wall between them. She apologized through tears, saying she didn't understand what her body was supposed to do, that she had been told to fear what they were now asked to share. He whispered that it was fine, that love would find its way. But beneath his calm voice, shame began to grow. He felt guilty for wanting, guilty for not knowing how to comfort her without crossing a boundary he no longer understood. The next morning, they smiled for photographs, fingers intertwined, as if nothing had broken. But inside, something had shifted. Every prayer after that felt slightly off-key. Every touch he tried to offer met a quiet retreat. Weeks turned into months. They lived as companions, kind, polite, untouched. She slept on her side, always facing the wall. He started to believe that patience, not love, was the foundation of marriage. Yet patience began to taste like punishment. He tried to talk to his pastor once. The man smiled kindly and said, "These things take time. God rewards obedience." Matt nodded, but the words landed like stones. How much time? How much silence? How much obedience before intimacy stopped feeling like sin? In the evenings, he sat by the window watching streetlights flicker while she read quietly on the bed. Two people bound by vows and divided by fear. And though no one could see it, something invisible was slipping away. Not faith, not love, but the small, essential rhythm that allows two bodies to breathe together without shame. That absence would become his teacher and his undoing. 3 months into the marriage, the silence began to ache like a bruise that wouldn't fade. It wasn't the absence of touch that hurt Matt. It was the absence of language. There were no words for what they didn't understand, no safe way to speak of what both of them quietly feared. Every evening, he tried to bridge the distance, small gestures at first, a hand on her shoulder, an offer to pray together before bed. Sometimes she accepted, sometimes she flinched, almost imperceptibly, as though contact itself were too loud. He learned to read her stillness the way others read scripture. When she grew quiet, he stopped reaching. When she smiled politely, he knew the conversation was over. He told himself this was what love required: gentleness, patience, silence. But silence has a cost. It turns care into isolation, devotion into distance. One night, unable to sleep, Matt walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. The reflection in the window startled him. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, a man who prayed but no longer believed he was heard. He thought of all the sermons that promised purity would bring peace. None had warned about the loneliness that comes when your own body feels like forbidden ground. He tried to pray again, but his words felt mechanical, as if he were reciting a contract rather than speaking to God. "Teach me to love her," he whispered. But deep down, another voice answered, "How can you love what you're not allowed to touch?" The fracture between them widened quietly. Sarah began volunteering more at church, organizing women's retreats, and staying later after service. Matt admired her dedication, but part of him wondered if she too was running from the same emptiness. One Sunday afternoon, during a sermon on marital purity, Matt's chest tightened. The preacher's words were sharp but familiar. The body must obey the spirit. Flesh is weak. Discipline brings freedom. Around him, people nodded. Sarah took notes. But for the first time, Matt felt something rebel inside him. If discipline was freedom, why did it feel like bondage? That night, he found her crying quietly in the bathroom. She said nothing at first, only wiped her face and whispered, "I don't know what's wrong with me." He sat beside her, unsure of what comfort meant anymore. "Nothing's wrong with you," he said softly. "We're just learning." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. Learning implied progress. They weren't moving at all. Later, lying awake, he thought about all the things they had been told not to do, all the words they had been told not to say. He realized they had never once spoken about desire, what it meant, how it worked, how it felt. They had been prepared for every kind of sin except silence. In that moment, shame began to turn into curiosity. Not curiosity of rebellion, but of honesty. He wanted to understand why something sacred could feel so cold, why the union meant to express love now carried so much fear. He started reading quietly at night, books on relationships, on communication, on the intersection between faith and the body. He was careful not to let Sarah see. He didn't want her to think he was searching for escape. He was searching for understanding. In one book, a therapist wrote, "A body that has been taught to fear itself cannot trust touch, even when it's safe." The line struck him with the weight of revelation. Maybe this wasn't just about faith. It was about unlearning fear. Weeks passed, and his patience began to change shape. It stopped being obedience to doctrine and became something deeper, a slow, painful empathy for both of them. He began to notice how often her shoulders tightened when someone hugged her, how her smile faltered when couples laughed about intimacy. He realized that neither of them had failed. They had simply been trained to see love as a reward for purity instead of a language to be learned. And no one had ever taught them the alphabet. One evening, after dinner, he finally spoke. "Sarah," he said gently, "I think we need help." She looked at him, startled. "Help? From who?" "Someone who understands this. Someone who can teach us what we were never shown." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't turn away. It wasn't confession to a priest, it was confession to truth. The silence they had worshipped was finally beginning to break. They began with counseling, quietly, without telling anyone at church. The therapist, a middle-aged woman named Evelyn, greeted them without judgment. Her office was warm, lined with books in soft lamplight. She spoke little at first, letting silence do the work. For two people raised to fill silence with prayer, that quiet felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. On their first session, Evelyn asked them to describe their wedding night, not the physical details, but the emotions. Sarah's voice shook. "I felt trapped," she said, "like I was failing before I even began." Matt swallowed hard. "I felt the same, but I thought I wasn't supposed to." Evelyn nodded. It's common for couples raised in purity culture to feel disoriented when intimacy finally becomes allowed. You've both learned to associate your bodies with sin. That doesn't change overnight. The sentence landed like mercy. For the first time, someone had named their pain without condemning it. In the sessions that followed, Evelyn taught them something neither their pastors nor families ever had: the difference between control and connection. "Desire isn't the enemy of faith," she said. "It's the language your body uses to express trust, and trust takes time." Matt listened, but part of him resisted. He had spent his life mastering restraint. Now every lesson felt like undoing the very foundation that had kept him steady. But when he looked at Sarah, eyes tired, voice trembling, he knew this undoing was necessary. At home, they began simple exercises. Not touching, not kissing. Just breathing near each other. Evelyn called it sacred proximity. It was harder than Matt expected. The closeness made him nervous. His heartbeat quickened. He didn't know if it was fear or longing. Sometimes he confused the two. One evening, as they practiced, Sarah broke down crying. "I don't know how to feel safe," she whispered. "Every time you come close, I freeze. I'm sorry." He reached out, not to touch, but to steady his voice. You don't have to be sorry." And for once, he meant it. Her body wasn't rejecting him. It was remembering everything it had been taught to fear. After that, he read more about trauma, about how the body stores memory, that muscles can hold tension long after the mind forgets why, that safety, not passion, is the first doorway to connection. Every body has intelligence, Evelyn reminded them. It doesn't obey rules. It listens to history. Your task now isn't to demand pleasure or performance. It's to teach the body that love no longer means danger. The words rewired something in him. He stopped asking when things would get better. He started asking what safety looked like for her and for himself. But healing wasn't linear. Some days Sarah's smile returned. On others, she retreated again, lost in the fog of old shame. Matt tried to stay patient, but the weight of loneliness pressed heavy. Nights stretched long. He prayed again, not for purity this time, but for peace. One night, unable to sleep, he found himself writing in a notebook Evelyn had given him. Maybe faith was never meant to silence the body. Maybe it was meant to listen to it. The next week, they practiced something new: verbal consent. Evelyn explained that consent wasn't only physical, it was emotional rhythm. Ask before assuming comfort, she said, and when you're unsure, pause. At first, it felt clinical, but slowly the pauses became sacred. They began to replace old reflexes with gentler ones. Instead of pushing through discomfort, they began to name it. Instead of hiding behind scripture, they learned to speak plain truths. I feel scared. I don't know what to do. Can we stop? Each sentence was a dismantling of years of silence. One evening, after a long session, Sarah looked at him differently. "You've changed," she said softly. "You don't rush anymore." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm finally learning what patience was supposed to mean." Still, the fear of failure lingered. Every time they approached intimacy, his chest tightened. He feared that if she flinched again, he would break. But Evelyn's voice echoed in him. Pleasure is not performance. It's trust in motion. He repeated it like prayer. Weeks later, during a session focused on safe touch, Evelyn invited them to place a hand over their own hearts. "Before you reach for each other," she said, "practice reaching for yourselves. The body always asks before it gives." Matt felt foolish at first, but as his palm rested against his chest, a slow awareness spread through him. His heart beat steady. For the first time in years, he didn't feel guilt for being alive inside his body. He looked at Sarah. Her eyes were closed, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. She whispered, "It feels strange, but right." That night, as they drove home, the silence between them felt different. Not empty, but full of something new. Possibility. They weren't healed. They weren't fixed. But for the first time, they were both present. And in that presence, a quiet truth began to form. The understanding that love, real love, isn't the reward for waiting. It's the courage to meet yourself, unguarded, in the presence of another. What began as a marriage built on promises was slowly becoming a classroom for rediscovery. And in that fragile, beautiful space, both of them were learning the same lesson. Holiness was never about avoiding the body. It was about learning to inhabit it together. It happened on an ordinary Thursday, the kind that arrives without omen. Rain on the windshield, groceries in the back seat. A voicemail from Evelyn reminding them, gently, to practice staying. Matt parked under a streetlight and watched the drops slide down the glass like beads on a rosary. He felt the familiar ache of effort, of trying to be a good husband, a good believer, a good man whose patience was supposed to fix what silence had broken. For the first time, he admitted a forbidden truth. Patience had kept the peace, but it had not brought them closer. That night, he asked Sarah if they could talk without solutions. No scripture, no timelines, no "we'll get there." Just the truth. They sat on the floor, no table between them, no armor of routine. He told her he was lonely, not angry, not disappointed. Lonely like a house with the lights on in every room, but no one home. Of Evelyn's smallest practices, knees touching, hands visible, breaths counted together. "We're not seeking intensity," she had said. "We're seeking honesty." On the third breath, Sarah's chest hitched. Matt started to pull away, old reflex. She shook her head. "Stay," she whispered. He did. The word felt like a new kind of vow. Every body holds its own intelligence, Evelyn often reminded them. Touch isn't about technique, it's about listening. So they listened, to the tremor in his thigh, to the heat gathering in her palms, to the thousand stories living under their skin. They named what they noticed. Tight, shaky, here. The more precise they became, the less threatening the moment felt. Muscles, it turned out, unlearn faster than memory. Safety rewires faster than fear. Matt asked the question he had never dared. "Where do you feel safest right now?" Sarah placed her own hand over her heart. "Here," she said. He mirrored her, palm over chest, and realized how foreign that tenderness felt when directed inward. He had spent years guarding his body from sin and had forgotten to bless it with care. The body always asks before it gives, he remembered. No one had taught him to hear the asking. They allowed touch in inches. Her hand on his forearm, his fingers resting over her knuckles, each contact preceded by a yes, each pause honored like prayer. When tears came, they did not interpret them as failure. Evelyn had taught them that tears and tenderness live in the same nervous system. Emotion is not disobedience, it is evidence. The body was not refusing love, it was requesting safety first. At one point, Sarah spoke a sentence that reframed his entire map of holiness. "I learned to please God by disappearing." The words landed in him like truth and grief at once. He realized he had tried to meet her where doctrine said she should be, not where her body actually was. Faith without the body had made them both ghosts. They decided to change the goal. Not union. Climax, not progress charted like righteousness. Tonight, the goal was presence without pressure. 10 minutes of shared breath, 1 minute of shared touch. A clear stop time, permission to end early. Consent not as gait, but as rhythm. When they reached the edge of discomfort, Matt asked, "Pause." She nodded. They paused, and something astonishing happened. The moment did not break, it deepened. The pause itself became their first experience of trust. Afterward, they lay back on the rug, ankle to ankle, staring at the ceiling. He felt a low, steady warmth in his chest, new but not urgent. She exhaled longer than he had ever heard, as if something inside had unclenched. No fireworks, no triumph, only the unmistakable relief of not pretending. He thought of every sermon that had promised reward after restraint. No sermon had said that the reward might be this. The quiet knowledge that they could stay with each other without harm. The next day, they wrote a short covenant in plain language and taped it inside the closet. We move at the speed of safety. We ask before assuming. We stop at the first no. We speak what is true, not what is expected. We bless what we feel before we try to change it. It was not romantic. It was holy in a way he finally recognized. When they returned to Evelyn, she listened, then said only, "Good." Now let your bodies believe it. Healing, she reminded them, is repetition, not revelation. So they repeated. Small, ordinary practices that looked like nothing and added up to everything. Breath before touch, words before reach, gratitude before goal. One evening, weeks later, Matt noticed a change so subtle he might have missed it. Sarah laughed while washing dishes, a small, unguarded sound he hadn't heard since their engagement. He didn't hurry to make it mean more. He simply stood beside her and let the sound settle into his bones. Presence before progress. Connection before outcome. Pleasure, he finally understood, was not a trophy for the faithful. It was the echo of safety. The turning point was not one night that fixed the past. It was a series of honest pauses that refused to repeat it. And as those pauses gathered into trust, Matt felt a new kind of faith waking, one that did not ask him to disappear from his own body and did not ask her to betray hers, so they could meet at last in the only place love survives, here. The months that followed moved slowly, like dawn through heavy curtains. Nothing sudden, nothing loud, but light still found its way in. Their progress was quiet, nearly invisible from the outside. No declarations, no miraculous breakthrough, only rhythm returning where fear had once lived. Matt noticed first in the mornings. She no longer turned her back when she woke. Instead, she stretched toward him, fingertips brushing his arm as if testing the air. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they stayed silent, but the silence no longer frightened them. It was no longer exile, it was rest. In therapy, Evelyn began shifting the focus from repair to embodiment. Now that safety exists, she said, what does aliveness feel like? Sarah hesitated. I don't know yet. Evelyn smiled. Good, that means you're listening. Listening became their new ritual. They listened to breath, to laughter, to the subtle ways presence speaks before words. They found joy in unremarkable things. His hands guiding a cup toward her, her head leaning on his shoulder during long drives. The body, it seemed, did not need grand gestures to remember trust. Matt's faith, once built on control, began to change shape too. He still prayed, but no longer to suppress his humanity. He prayed to integrate it. He thanked God for nerve endings, for the warmth that followed a deep exhale, for the simple holiness of feeling safe inside skin. He no longer separated sacred from physical. They had become one. One evening, Sarah said, almost to herself, I don't feel broken anymore. Matt didn't respond right away. He wanted the words to land. Gently, unhurried. When he finally spoke, he said, maybe we were never broken, just untaught. Her smile carried both relief and sorrow, the mourning of years lost to silence and the gratitude of finally finding language. Their intimacy, once a battlefield, was now a dialogue. Some nights they held each other in stillness. Other nights they touched slowly, reverently, as if learning a hymn by heart. There was no script, no expectation, only curiosity and consent. Each breath, each pause was both prayer and education. Matt began journaling again, the pages filled with small observations. Safety feels like her hand on mine. Desire feels like warmth without pressure. Peace feels like choosing to stay. He realized he no longer chased redemption. He was living it. The transformation was not dramatic, but it was complete. They had rebuilt intimacy not through instruction, but through awareness. What purity had divided, presence had stitched back together, thread by patient thread. In the quiet glow of that new peace, Matt understood what Evelyn had meant all along. Healing doesn't make you new, it makes you whole. Years later, when Matt tried to describe what had changed, he never mentioned the wedding night. He spoke instead of what came after. The silence that turned into listening, the fear that softened into presence. People think faith broke me, he once told Evelyn, but maybe it was faith that survived, just a different kind. He had learned that devotion is not obedience without question, but awareness without denial. For most of his life, he believed that love meant sacrifice, that desire was the test he must pass to stay worthy. Now he understood. Love was not the absence of desire, but the compassion to meet it with honesty. He looked back at his younger self with tenderness, not regret. That man had done what he was taught, waiting, hoping, repressing, and when it all collapsed, he had chosen not to close. That choice alone was grace. Sarah, too, had changed. The trembling woman who once apologized for flinching was now steady, grounded. She spoke openly about the body as part of the soul, about how intimacy begins long before touch, with trust, with truth, with breath. She started volunteering with couples at their church, not as a teacher, but as a listener. Her voice carried no judgment, only a calm invitation to honesty. Their stories spread quietly, not through confession, but through presence. People noticed peace in them, and peace, they learned, is contagious. Matt wrote once in his journal, "The body never forgets what fear taught it, but it can learn another language." That language had become their shared prayer, the language of noticing before fixing, of asking before assuming, of blessing what is felt before trying to change it. They no longer sought perfection, they sought coherence, faith that included the body, love that included silence, pleasure that included God. In the end, their healing was not a return to what they had been promised. It was the creation of something entirely new, a faith that did not separate spirit from skin or purity from presence. And when people asked what saved their marriage, Matt would smile and answer simply, learning to stay. The years unfolded gently, marked not by milestones, but by moments. A glance that lingered, a prayer whispered without fear, a touch that no longer needed permission to exist. What began as a fracture had become a map, a living record of what happens when love learns to breathe. Matt often thought about the first night again, not with shame, but with a kind of reverence distance. It had been the wrong beginning, yes, but perhaps that was necessary. Some stories have to break before they can become honest. What destroyed him then had, in its quiet aftermath, rebuilt him from the inside out. When he spoke to other men, friends, parishioners, strangers who still carried their own secret silences, he never offered advice. He asked questions instead. When did you last feel safe in your own body? What if patience isn't waiting, but staying? What if the body isn't temptation, but testimony? He learned that every man carried a story that began in silence, and every silence, when met with gentleness, could turn into a conversation with the self. Sarah began writing too. Short reflections, journal entries turned into essays. She never called them lessons, but each one carried a truth. The body always asks before it gives. Pleasure isn't performance, it's trust in motion. Tears and tenderness live in the same nervous system. Those lines reached people quietly. They spread online, quoted without names, translated into languages she would never hear. It didn't matter. The message wasn't about them, it was about everyone who had ever mistaken shame for virtue and silence for safety. On a quiet evening, years later, They returned to the same small church where they had once exchanged vows. The building hadn't changed, same pews, same worn altar, but everything inside them had. During the final hymn, Matt reached for her hand. It wasn't ceremony, it was continuation. When the music faded, he turned to her and said, "I used to think purity was what we protected. Now I think it's what we recover." She nodded, smiling softly. "Maybe purity isn't the absence of experience," she said. "Maybe it's the presence of truth." They walked out together into the dusk, the sound of bells echoing through the trees. Each step felt grounded, embodied, a rhythm they had earned. The air was warm, the kind that hums with the quiet promise of continuation. If you were to meet Matt today, you would not see a man of tragedy or a moral to repeat. You would see a man at peace inside his own skin, a man who learned that faith is not the opposite of desire, but its companion. And if this story touched something in you, let it be this. Reminder, the body is not an obstacle to holiness. It is its home. Tonight, before you sleep, take a breath. Feel it move through you, not as duty, not as sin, but as belonging. Maybe that's where your own healing begins.